all began with the discovery of the critically endangered Western Ringtail Possum on our property. After watching some YouTube videos, I decided to make a couple of drays or nests to see if I could provide them with some additional shelter should they so desire. The fact that they were on the property would suggest that they were doing okay without my help, but there was a fox and a cat lurking around, so I made the drays from some hanging pot plant holders from our local hardware store and hung them in the trees where I had photographed the possums earlier. It soon became evident that other creatures saw my benevolence as a bonus, as that ring-necked parrot there can attest. After leaving the drays in position for a while, the possums had disappeared, so I had a rethink and I removed the drays to a site closer to the house. This was no easy task, as I had to position a ladder against the trees and try to unhook the pesky little clasps that enable these contraptions to hang without falling off the ladder. As a countermeasure against the drays swinging in the breeze, I had also used grunt straps to hold them in position, and these were also quite difficult to undo whilst holding on for dear life. Eventually I got the first one completed and repeated the whole procedure on the other tree, as you can see there. As part of my conservation plan, I had built a couple of wooden boxes, which were an alternative to the hanging baskets. But as soon as I placed the boxes in the trees, the bees took a liking to them, and so they got a shower from the hose to deter them. Of course, the bees didn't agree with this treatment, and I quickly removed the box from the tree and went back to the shed for a dry out and a coat of paint. The box had not even been up for more than a few hours before I discovered the interlopers. It was a scary few moments while I removed the box and persuaded the bees to back off. I had intended to multitask these boxes by putting a perch on the outside, so any interested birds could take a peek inside and use it as a temporary home if the possums had declined. I'd not counted on the bees moving in quite so fast, though. With the hanging drays in position and the camera set up, I left nature to take its course, and I was surprised at how soon the possums located them. In previous footage in a different location, I'd captured a single possum, but seeing two together was very surprising, and I must say delightful, as I had read a report that this species was believed to be suffering from a debilitating disease which is causing blindness. So it was comforting to see two comparatively healthy individuals investigating the nest. They haven't worked out how to get into the nest at this stage, but you can see that curiosity is getting the better of them. I made two nests, and one is slightly bigger than the other, The openings are also quite small in order to keep out the weather, which is why the black plastic is covering the top. Maybe the openings are too small, but only time will tell if they want to use this free housing. When Kay and I went to Bali, I left the trail cameras in the previous location and was quite alarmed to find that no new footage had been captured while we'd been away, and my first thoughts were that the fox or the cat had caught them. But after relocating the cameras to this location, I was very surprised at how quickly the possums discovered these artificial drays. It took them a fraction longer than the bees, but the bees only operate during daylight and the possums only operate during night time. So the bees had an advantage, but the possums were pretty quick, and they were up that gum tree the same night that the nests were put up. They obviously feel quite comfortable around this tree because almost every night they're there now. It may be that I'm a little bit late in putting these drays up because they're basically designed to give them a shelter, I think, during breeding season, because they obviously have their own shelter in the bush somewhere around here, and this is maybe just a curiosity for them. But hopefully I'm going to leave them up for as long as they last, and we'll see if anybody or anything does eventually take over. Meanwhile, I'd painted the original box a light grey colour, not for any reason, but that I had paint left over from painting the house and it was a shame to waste it. I relocated the smaller dray to the lower portion of the gum tree, just under that box, and in order to give the possums maximum choice. Now apparently there's a rental crisis here in Australia, and I thought they'd be clamouring to take possession, but sadly this tree doesn't seem as attractive to them as the one diagonally opposite, so location, location, location still holds true, I guess. But the small branch in the foreground kept triggering the camera, so I elected to move the whole dray and attach it to a chain holding the box. And you'll see this particular footage. This is the possum on the opposite trunk of this tree trying to get across, but he obviously didn't make it. The small branch in the foreground to the left of the bottom rung of that box was causing a few problems with the camera being triggered prematurely. So I decided that I would get up there and I'd trim it off. And in doing so, I then decided that it might have been an even better idea, based on the fact that the animal couldn't get across, that perhaps I should move the dray itself and attach it to that chain that you can see on the right hand side. So the next few scenes, this is what I'm actually doing. I'm moving the dray from that branch, that little tiny branch, across to the chain, and then to hopefully counteract the bees, I put a gum leaf in the tray there to attract the possum, if you like. But the hole on the box, I was still concerned about bees, and eventually I took a handful of gum leaves and small branches and stuffed them in that hole, just to see if it would prevent the bees from getting in there. Now, after quite a number of adjustments, I thought, oh, I've probably nailed it now. And here I am adding a few gum leaves to the top to entice the beast over. And in the next minute or so, I'm now checking my phone to make sure that the camera is angled where it should be. Now, after doing all that work, I had a couple of nights without any footage whatsoever up there, but then I got this, and this is obviously the possum. You'll see its paw, and it's right in front of the camera. Now, the camera is sitting on the trunk of another part of the tree. It's like a forked trunk, and he can't get across. He's obviously trying to get to the dray that's there and the box, but he's finding it difficult to climb his way across, as you can see. You see the ladder there. I'd left that resting because I thought he might climb up it, but instead he's come down the trunk of the tree in front of the camera. This is him upside down. You can see his jaw. And I then thought, well, after I'd seen that, I need to do some more modifications here. I've got to find a way of enabling him to get across to that other tree without him going on the ground and having to climb up it. Meanwhile, over on the next tree, this little guy, and I'm not sure whether it's the same because we know there are two now, and he's going to come down this branch. He's still trying to work out how to get into this thing, or it certainly piqued his interest. As I was looking at this footage, I realised that where I had the dray attached, you can see the grunt strap at the bottom, and it's also hanging by a chain at the very top on that branch. But where that branch is going off at about 45 degrees is actually where the opening is, and I thought, well, they probably are having difficulty looking in there or squeezing in if they wanted to. And so I had another rethink, and I thought, well, I might just change that and move the actual, let's call it the ball, move it down to the fork of that tree there, just below where the grunt strap is attached to the actual tree itself. The next morning, over at the other tree, the bees had taken a liking to the grey box. Maybe they liked the decor, but in anticipation I'd stuffed the entry hole with gum leaves. But now that was not going to deter the bees. They're just determined to find a way in. They're trying to enter the small gap between the lid and the roof, as well as trying to get around the gum leaves too. So that day, it was a very busy day. At the adjacent tree, I decided to move that nest slightly, open up the entry hole, and you can probably see there, the roof of my house is about 6 metres off the ground, and I'm probably up there. I estimated it was about 3.5 metres, but I'm probably a bit higher. Anyway, now the plan here is to detach the dray and move it a little way further down the tree into a hollow formed by the fork. I think I mentioned that earlier. And then I'll make it easier for the possums to see the entry hole, and therefore it should be easier for them to access. I keep saying they might access this, but they may not. And also I want the hole to be in front of the camera, so if they do decide to enter, I can capture that on the video. And the little clips on the basket, they're a real pain. They're quite tight and difficult to unclip, especially when you're standing on a ladder. virtually the top rung of it, and there's not an awful lot underneath except tree. Now I'm opening up the hole. It's a couple of flaps, and I'm just feeding them back and feeding them in under the wire, part of the wire basket. And then I bring it down, and it's got to fit into the hollow, as you can see here, still attached with the grunt strap. And then I can reattach the basket, or the whole ball thing, to that hollow of the tree. But I had to go and get some pliers because I needed to open it up so I could hang it on the branch. There's a little tiny branch off to that one that's hanging about 45 degrees. So I had to go and get the pliers in the shed, and then re-hook that thing up, and then reattach a couple of grunt straps to hold it steady, and then reposition the whole thing in front of the camera, make sure that it's going to catch it, and we'll see what happens once that is all in situ. Those little clips on the basket, they're a real pain in the basket, let me tell you. Trying to do that, and I'm standing God knows how far up off the ground, and trying to manoeuvre all this stuff. And there is the odd bee buzzing around. They're still showing a bit of interest. Anyway, the things I do in the pursuit of nature. Now back at the other tree, I realised that possum needed a rope bridge to span the gap between the trees from the previous footage. He was having difficulty. And so, with the help of the lovely Kay, we found a rope, which was in the shed, and it was strung around the two trees that I'm doing here now, and constructing a little rope bridge like they've done along one of the main thoroughfares here in town to assist these possums from getting across the road via a rope bridge. So this is our own little rope bridge that we've constructed in the hope that this possum will see it, hopefully tonight, and decide that he can scurry across there with his tail and his paws. And I hope he doesn't get stung by those bees, because you can see the bees are still hanging around there. They're trying to get in at the very top, in the gaps, any gaps there, and around there near the gum leaves, which are stuffed into the hole to try and stop them. Anyway, this last pieces of this footage, me constructing the rope bridge, and I think I put a little bit of a grunt strap on the bottom to hold that dray in position around the base of the smaller trunk. And now we're going to just wait and leave the cameras up there and ticking away, and we shall see, hopefully, what we get tonight. There is the stabilizing grunt strap going into position to hold the whole thing steady so that when the possum steps upon it, he won't fall off. Well, he shouldn't fall off anyway. He's a possum. He's got tensile tail and 4 paws to grip. Anyway, that's my effort at my little conservation project now. Just a couple of final adjustments here, opening the opening to facilitate entry. Probably the bees will take over it. Oh, don't be so like that. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this, folks, and whatever happens, I shall keep you informed if we get some more exciting footage. Thank you for watching. Bye for now.